Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. We take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the regional sourcebook Halflings and Hops, Gazetteer of Luiren, designed by Stormcrow Dreamscapes, aka Jean Uzmen, and Ed Greenwood, for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, you can reach me via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. I am not familiar with the region of Luiren. I imagine actually be very fascinated. Let me know in the comments if you are familiar with this region. I had to look it up on a map, and there are not a lot of good maps of Faerun out there because, unfortunately, 5th edition Wizards of the Coast pretty much only has a laser focus on the Sword Coast and the areas around it, maybe all the way up to Icewind Dale and all the way down to Chult. But if you really want to get a bigger picture of like all of Faerun and how it extends over to the east, you got to look at older editions or just fan-made map images, which thankfully there are. So I had to do some hunting to discover where the hell is this region at, because brought on board Ed Greenwood, and it's on the DM's Guild, so it's got to be an official location. So I learned something in that this is, all right, we take the Sword Coast here, and I'm mirror image, so, bear with me here, all the way up to Icewind Dale up here, and then all the way down to Chult, the bottom. And then if you go east, you can go all the way to the Anarok Desert, which is usually about as far as we go in 5th edition. And if you go east of that, you'll end up in Thay. If you end up going south from probably Anarok, you end up in like Cormyr, kind of in the middle. And then if you just go basically southeast of that for a couple more regions, then you end up in Luiren, which is on the coast, on the southeastern end of the continent. I had no idea of anything about it, so this was all new to me. And apparently, it is kind of a homeland for halflings in a lot of way, as you can tell by the title. So this is a region that's filled with different adventure locations. It's got mountains and swamplands and forests and caverns and pretty much everything, and a gulf, a giant water section, because this poor region was apparently devastated by the spell plague, which I believe happened in 4th edition. And the whole area was covered in water as the Gulf waters rose and devastated the region, and then they have finally started receding. And in fact, they're receding so far that leads to even more adventure locations, because the Gulf itself is kind of the opposite of the real world. The waters are just going down, and that's revealing more like islands that have been buried in different lost sites. So that's a whole special regional location. But it's very heavily tied into the lore of D&D, so I think a lot of folks who are really into the Forgotten Realms specifically, and especially who really tire of the Sword Coast and kind of long to explore some of these other areas, will get a lot of joy out of this. Also, it's just got a lot of good information about halflings and halfling culture in the Forgotten Realms, which you could just take as, if you're somebody who is going to be playing as a halfling, maybe not necessarily in that location. I would also argue that it's just a well-written source book with a lot of good adventure ideas, that you could just steal that and put it in anywhere you want. You could put that in the Vandalin region, or wherever, the Sword Coast if you want to. That's where all the 5th edition stuff is. If you want to just take some of these interesting ideas and all these factions and things, you could easily move stuff around, because I don't know how often people are going to be traveling that far away from the Sword Coast. But if you are, then that information this is everything you could probably want from this region, which is exactly what I want from a source book. I want you to give me all the broad strokes, give me some details if I want it, make sure it's easy to read, because these source books can absolutely come off as, school textbooks in a lot of ways. Now, this one does lack a lot of the fancier art that I've been privileged to enjoy from a lot of, high-profile DM's Guild releases, but I will say I do like the art style that was chosen here, instead of going with maybe an overabundance of typical stock art that I've seen everywhere. The designer and publisher uses this kind of nice, just black and white art that it just works. It kind of works with the page design, and it's consistent throughout the entire, whatever it is, 70 some pages. So I did appreciate the way it looks, and it kind of grew on me after a while. So I really enjoyed it. It almost has kind of like a textbook flavoring to it. So what you get with the Halfling and Hops book is notes on halflings and their culture, including their religion, and they're basically like hippies. It's all very Tolkien-esque. One thing I really got from this region in this book is it's extremely traditional high fantasy. So it's ogres, it's dragons, it's halflings exactly like I would picture them in Lord of the Rings, which is everybody's when pictures high fantasy. That's kind of what we're picturing here. And there's no there are the Zentarum is here, the Harpers are here for sure, but the halflings just seem like they're good, like natured farm folk who worship this Yandala, who is this goddess of like harvest and joy and merriment. And then there's a bunch of other pantheons they go through, and they're all about their cooking and their feasts and celebrations. They're just a bunch of friendly hippies, and it sounds absolutely delightful. Now, my question was, well, that's all great, but where's the adventure? Like, there's not a lot of drama in the halfling towns, for example. They don't seem to have too many problems. Like, where does the adventure come from? So that was a little bit of an issue I had coming into it, but then as I started reading the 30-some pages of regional breakdown that talked about all these different adventure sites and all the different monsters and creatures and factions, then it started definitely coming into play where there is a ton of adventure content here. So if you're thinking like, all right, halflings, I can't take that too seriously. I don't have anything really cool going on. There's no like wars or these feuding families or anything like that. And no, there's really not. It's just kind of a happy-go-lucky place, but they still have a lot of problems. And there are still some badass halfling like warriors, and there's wardens of the dead and Hinfist and all these factions that are designed for combat. We also get a bunch of new backgrounds and details of the town of Willow Nook, including a map, which is very cool. Just to go through some of this stuff, which I think does a great job if you are planning on role-playing your halflings. I love the breakdown of meals, of drinks, of pipeweed. They get really into the weeds, pun intended, of just role-playing your detailed descriptions of all your meals and your merriments and your pleasures. Halflings, not necessarily hedonists, but just they know the natural world, and they know how to convert that into things that taste very good. And in this case, there's a lot of detail about that, which I appreciate. A really funny D100 list of trinkets that are tied to the region. And there we go, the Gulf of Luiren, which, as you can see, full of, it's a very swampy, woodsy, and mountainy. And it does a great job of giving me lots and lots of cool adventure ideas for all of these locations, which is the bulk of what this book is. Yes, we get some detailed information about halfling culture. Some of it is at the very beginning, as you saw, with talking about their meals and favorite and their religious pantheons, and then some of it is at the end where we talk about the different factions, as well as the breakdown of the one major town, I guess, of Willow Nook. But the majority of this book, half of it at least, is going to be this regional source book breakdown, which is probably my favorite part of most source books, where it talks about, hey, here's all the different areas and zones and why you should care as a DM. And that's the important thing I'm looking for is, history is great and all, but don't explain it to me like a history book. Explain it to me like I'm somebody looking for the fun. I'm somebody looking for the adventure and why I should care about this location as a DM and why my players should care about it as players looking to do something. They're looking to interact with something. You got to give me things to play with, and I think it does a pretty good job. I mean, in the swamps alone, which is called the Amber Bowl bog, which I like the fact that it's all organized by region. So it's like, here's the swamp, and then here's all the locations. Here's the mountains, and then here's all the locations. Here's the Gulf, and then here's some locations. That works out very well. The swamp alone has a green hag called Auntie Titchwillow, and she has a coven, but her coven is under a lot of drama right now between a bunch of different monsters in the area. One coven member was killed by a lizard folk tribe, and the other was captured by the Spiders of Addercop Woods, which is run by a Bebelith, which is a big, like, nasty demon spider who has just amassed. She was part of this big war during the Spell Plague, and then she was wounded, and she kind of licked her wounds in this Addercop Woods, and then she's been building her forces full of spiders, and she's been corrupting the treant that's kind of runs the woods nearby, and she's been corrupting this treant in order to create blights, and so she's got this big army, and you can see all these different multiple factions. And it talks about how Auntie Titch Willow, yes, she's a hag and she's nasty, but she's also definitely on her back foot because of all these, her sisters have all been captured or killed, and she's in trouble. So she would be willing to parlay with any adventurers in order to especially go rescue her other sister. So you can already see, like, all right, that's great. That's some cool drama between, monstrous factions and creatures. I can definitely work with that, and those are some cool ideas. There's also a Yuan-Ti cult that's seeking to release an old druid ghost from within a sealed city. All of that, by the way, is just within the swamps alone. The Gulf of Luiren is receding, as I mentioned, because the spell plague had all the water come up and wash through everything, and the halflings and a bunch of folks still survived, and now the waters are receding even further. So they're revealing a lot of new location sites and treasures. There's a lost island guarded by undead pirates. There's a half-sunken city filled with mutants whose depths reach all the way down into the far realm at the very bottom. There's a white tower on an island that was born from the remains of a magic weapon that was destroyed and became sentient and is now a tower, which is now home to a wise old wizard. And the Luir Woods has a ranger, a guardian ranger mounted on a dinosaur. There's a court of majestic eagles with a giant raven who is really a were-raven who wants to take over, so there's some court intrigue for you. There's a friendly group of lycanthropes, and there's a recently sealed unsealed cavern that leads to the Underdark. We've got clans of beholders, a dwerger mine, a mountainous ogre tribe, multiple goblin tribes. There was like a dozen different goblin tribes within the mountains. Mountains are like really dangerous. There's a haunted inn run by a Zentarum innkeeper. There's a school that's like, I think it's a school of philosophy that's run by a nasty dean who's been delving into deep, dark secrets, and there's been murders and bad things happening at the school, and probably the dean is behind everything, just a really ambitious, bad dude. So, I mean, there's a lot of really cool adventure ideas in here. This was probably my favorite section because it was an easy read, and it was fun to immerse myself in all these different adventure ideas because, again, I was coming into it thinking, gosh, halfling realm, like what, you picture, so the idyllic, the Shire, the classic Tolkien-esque realm, and a lot of these adventure sites felt, you got your spiders and your monsters, your ogres, and the, it feels like it could be very Tolkien-esque. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing at all. It's just, that's just the flavor that's happening here. But, my concern was like, is there enough adventure to be had? And I think the answer is yes. I think there's a ancient red dragon here who's been who also was tied into the spell plague. If you like the spell plague thing, there's a lot of post spell plague adventures to be had here. And this one had a big fight with another young dragon, and he had almost died. And then the cult of the dragon came in and was able to heal him, but kind of put him to sleep. So he's been slowly awakening from that, and now he's going to come back and be a major player in this region. So, I mean, you don't even have to really interact with the halflings that much. It could almost be your hub town to heal up, and then all the adventure is actually going to be outside of the major town. In fact, there wasn't that many necessarily interesting quest ideas from the town itself, as opposed to just all the surrounding kind of monsters and factions and areas, although the town was certainly fine, I think. So I really enjoyed. I think it does a great job of making me interested in this region and all the various locations and things that you can do there. And yes, they're all tied into it lore-wise to that location. So if you're if you're a stickler for the Forgotten Realms area and the lore, I think you're going to enjoy this. For everyone, however, I would say, hey, even if you're never going to be in Luiren, you can take take that school of philosophy idea and drop that on the Sword Coast if you want to, or take the idea of the hag coven being dismantled by nearby monstrous factions and put that in, wherever, Neverwinter Woods or the Mare of Dead Men or whatever that swamp is near Neverwinter, I think. Put that stuff in the Sword Coast if you want to, and that's how you can utilize all this information. The other parts of the book, we've got a bunch of backgrounds. I was a little disappointed by what the designer decided to do with the background. So what this does is takes almost all, I think there's only one new one, which is this Adventure Lust. It takes all of the existing backgrounds in 5e, or at least the base, because, all the different books added more backgrounds over the years, but most of the base backgrounds, and just kind of adapts them to Luiren as if you were from that region. So you were a faction agent in Luiren, you were a gladiator in Luiren, you were a criminal or a noble in Luiren, and it gives you some ideas and things, which is nice. but I really wish we had just given me some new, and I get that not having new backgrounds means you don't have to redesign, because they're already there and they're designed to be flavored around. But I would have really preferred if you had given me new backgrounds specifically based on the new factions, which is the section that comes after this one. I don't want to be flippant about this section, but I kind of feel like anybody could have done this part of it. I mean, because you gave me all the information, right? The designer gave me all of that faction information, all this regional information. So I a typical player or DM could just say, well, okay, yeah, I want to play the noble, but I'm going to be tied into this faction this way. Like, you don't almost have to spell that out for me. Instead, what you could do is give me those new backgrounds with new, skills and tables and things based specifically on some of the new factions which are included in here, such as the Hin Fist, which, by the way, halflings, they don't call themselves halflings, of course. They're not half of anything. They call themselves the Hin. So there's a fighting. There's, we got your typical harpers. The Luckbringers, which worship Timora. You could be a mage. Or you could follow the mage of Willow Nook. She's basically the leader of the town. The March Wardens, there's the Ulinian Philosophers, which is that school. You could be from that school, which would be pretty cool. Maybe your background is tied into the fact that the school has gone down a dark path and then you want to go back and investigate it. Wardens of the Dead, you could either be a ranger or a cleric or a paladin. With that certain background, as your job is to go around and protect people from any undead sites. Just that give me those backgrounds based on those factions, and I think that would have been more interesting than just giving me the basic backgrounds and then adapting them towards Luiren, because again, I feel like anybody could have done that extra little step in there, but what I would have liked to see are the entirely new ones. And then the final section is just detailed information on Willow Nook. We do get a really cool full color map, which I appreciate, of the main town. That's for the halflings. Again, not as much maybe adventure content out of here compared to the rest of the book. I think there's enough here for sure. And a lot of it is just, hey, see that other section for the actual more interesting information, I suppose. But it's nice to have the full town marked down for sure. This is probably the part of me coming into it saying, yeah, all right, halflings, it's very cute and everything. I get more joy out of the intrigue and the conflict and the drama that can happen in a good urban environment. And this one is just kind of a happy-go-lucky stopping point town. And all the other adventure stuff is honestly in the surrounding area. But we get the full, fun little breakdown of all the sample families, which all seem extremely halfling and extremely fun if you especially subscribe to the classic Tolkien view of halflings and fantasy adventures in general. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Halfling and Hops. Pro, it features over 30 pages detailing the Luiren region with over 50 adventure locations and the town of Willow Nook. So basically combined the Sourcebook section with the Willow Nook section, and that's definitely worth the sale of this product. That's the Sourcebook stuff is really great. It's fantastic. I have no complaints about it. I enjoyed seeing all of the information and the ideas that I can gather from that, and not just knowing the history of all these little areas, but just, to me, the more interesting stuff is the adventure, and the adventure stuff is there in all of those different sections. So that was a huge positive, which is good because that's over half the book. Pro, dozens of historical sidebars featuring important and interesting NPCs, something I've glossed over, but you've seen all these green sidebars once we get to this section, really. And what it does is it breaks down a lot of the leaders of different factions or the important events, and it's a good, clever design, because obviously sidebars draw your eye towards that section, and it helps separate and it makes it easier to read. When you separate that information out, and allows for additional reading if you're really interested in that particular thing as well. It's almost like clicking on a hyperlink that's all right, tell me more about this particular event or this particular person, and that does a really great job of highlighting that information and making it interesting throughout this entire book. So thumbs up to all the sidebars that give me that history and makes that history interesting and relevant for those different adventure sites for sure. And Pro, over a dozen detailed factions, each with their own quest ideas. If I could be a little nitpicky, which I will, because that's what I do on my reviews. First of all, I love that we get these factions. I love them to death. I also love that they include their leaders, their dogma, which is basically what this faction believes in, what they're all about, and then a typical quests ideas. I would suggest that instead of giving me kind of vague ideas like investigate reports of undead activity or grave robbers, escort a coffin or urn to its final resting place, protect it from bandits, protect, just kind of, it's just shooting the shit about different adventure ideas and just kind of rolling things out there. What I would humbly suggest is give me specific quests, like this is the source book, right? So tell me, hey, so-and-so in this location wants you to go to this location and investigate this thing. Don't be afraid to use the proper nouns, because you just gave me all that information in your source book. So instead of just investigating reports of undead activity, like say, hey, this person hires you to investigate an uprising of undead or some weird undead happening at this location, which you've told me about in your section that has recently had some undead problems or something like that. That to me would be a lot more actionable and useful as a DM looking at this information than just kind of the vague, like, yeah, here's some ideas that you can use. Well, yeah, that's nice. And I'm not saying don't do that. That's fine. But I would have preferred to go a little bit of a step further. I'm not actually including that as an official con, by the way. That's because you gave me the some vague quest ideas, which is okay. But I would really have loved if you would give me those specific. Don't be afraid to use proper names and nouns if you are literally in the source book doing that kind of thing. So I would have liked that a little bit more. My con, which I really went back and forth whether or not to actually include this as an official con or not. Ultimately, I did, which is the backgrounds. I really wish instead of giving me just the same backgrounds I've seen a million times, the criminals, entertainer, sailor, charlatan, all those, that just tie in slightly to the region, give me new backgrounds. Give me new backgrounds using those cool new factions that you gave me. It's right there. It's the next section over. Take those factions and then give me a background based on that faction, and that is cool, and that automatically bakes in a cool quest line possibility for that player as well. And then you can give me those extra tables and work their dogma into your belief system and everything. Or maybe you're an ex-member, so maybe you don't believe in that anymore. But that would be, to me, far more interesting and of more value than just taking the same backgrounds and just saying, hey, you're this from this region. Well, yeah, of course you are if you're going to be from that region. That makes perfect sense. Final verdict: comprehensive and easy to read, Halfling and Hops' definitive guidebook for the Luiren region provides a wealth of fun adventure ideas for a lesser-known region of Faerun. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. And you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.